welcome back to another video. So today we'll be talking about how you can create a killer Common App activities list and write those descriptions for your extracurriculars. So first off, this video is not going to have any fancy editing or anything. I'm sure you guys have the attention span to sit through a video like this. So why am I exactly making this video? Well, if you make a quick Google search, you're going to find a lot of other YouTube videos as well as blog posts that give contradicting advice, right? So everyone's saying different things, so who should you listen to? Well, you shouldn't just listen to me, blindsided, right? So this is my opinion, right? This is my opinion. So if you want to listen to it, you can, but you don't have to, right? So there's a lot of examples also that I see on the internet that I don't think are up to par to what you need to display your best qualities to admissions officers, especially if you're aiming for those top selective universities. But yeah, anyways, let's first diagnose the most common issues, which in my opinion are easy fixes, but you never know, it varies based on a case-to-case scenario. So number one is being too vague, right? So you got to be specific with your responsibilities and impact, otherwise you're downplaying what you actually did, and that's never good. Number two, using bad words, not like cuss words or anything, but if you did use cuss words, yeah, you're out of contention, but basically using not strong action verbs and also not maximizing your characters, right? Just like writing unnecessary things. You'll see we're gonna have a example later that I'm gonna show you guys. That's gonna come up. Number three is being anti-numbers. Numbers are your best friend for extracurricular descriptions, so use them. Boom. All right. So first off, I like to represent extracurricular descriptions in 3 tiers. Now it's not as crystal clear as tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, right? It's not like that. For most people, it's somewhere in between, and even my tier 1 example is probably not tier 1, right? But basically, this is just give you a rough idea of the types of qualities that you might see at each tier for these descriptions, as well as the common problems. So for each of these, the position is going to be a tutor, right? And so, the organization name is School Tutoring Organization or whatever. So this is the tier 3 description. So please don't write something like this because it is not very good. So I was paid to tutor kids every weekend where I taught basic math and science. I helped the leaders make study plans and organize tutoring sessions. So a lot of problems, and I just have a little analysis over here. So first off is the use of unnecessary words / information. You can see words like I, where I, as well as periods. There's a period at the bottom here. You don't want to be using those unnecessary words because it takes away characters, right? So instead of saying I was paid to tutor kids every weekend, you could have just said paid to tutor kids every weekend. And even this part, even paid to tutor kids every weekend, that kind of ticks me off. I don't think that is a good representation. But number 2, lack of action verbs, right? So let's see the strongest verbs that we have here. So the strongest verbs we have here is paid, taught, helped, and I guess make and organize. I mean, taught and organize, those are good action verbs, but why would you want to say that you were paid to tutor kids every weekend, right? That just does not seem very impactful and not a good use of your characters, right? We get the point that when you're a tutor, right, you displayed this here. So why would you talk about tutoring kids again down here, as well as organizing the tutoring sessions, right? Those are just implied based on your role and position, so it wouldn't make sense to talk about it again. Number 3 is emphasizing the payment over passion, right? So in this specific example, when you're talking about paid to be tutoring kids, okay, that's nice and all, but now it seems like everything after it, right, all of this seems like there's a monetary incentive, and so you're not actually doing it based out of your own passion or wants to actually help people. And so that can really hurt you and paint you in a bad image, in a bad light. The last one is promoting a disengaged leadership role. So this is what I like to call passive language, right? This sentence right here, I helped the leaders make study plans and organize tutoring sessions. Okay, so all this right here, make study plans and organize tutoring sessions, that's not you, right? This is the leaders, whoever they are. Even that is really weird language, right? So you help them make the study plans and organize the tutoring sessions, but you didn't lead that, right? So now you're giving the credit to these leaders and you just helped them, right? And for all the admissions officers, no, this is something that the leaders accomplished on their own. You just said you helped them, right? So there's no way to validate the fact you seem like you don't have a lot of authority. And overall, this is just a very bad example. But now let's move on to a tier 2 example. So I think this one you guys will be able to relate to a lot more because it's not like the bottom of the barrel, but it actually makes an attempt to describe the activity in some good light. So we've got tutor. That's the same thing we had before, too cool tutoring organization, yada, yada, yada. So taught 5 students in various subjects every week, developed study plans for tests to boost learning, led events, established connections with 2 T's. Okay, I mean, first read, it doesn't even sound that bad, but there's a couple key problems. First off, we're listing responsibilities without quantifiable impact. You'll hear me say this a lot. Quantifiable impact, right? We need more numbers. I see one number right here, and that's 5. That's not good, right? We can't just have that because then everything else is not really going to hold the same weight than if you had numbers, right? So we get the point. You taught 5 students. Awesome. Various subjects. What subjects you should probably specify every week. Okay, I mean, this first off is a waste of space, right? Why not use something like weekly, right? Developed study plans for tests to boost learning. And boost learning here is a really weird phrase. You'll see it bullet number 3. Unspecific due to empty words or phrases, right? Such as boost learning, right? You're not really conveying that much. Okay, we get the point that anybody can use a dictionary or go on Google and search up, impacts of developing study plans to boost learning. But I need actual evidence and fact that you boosted learning. So because of this, you just saying boosted learning is not going to hold that much weight. And that is very similar to the established connections with 2 T's. I mean, I would think that if you were a tutor, that this last sentence, establishing those connections, would automatically come from that. And the last thing or bullet point here is that there are weak action verbs and as well as passive language, right? So, I mean, this one does it a little better than the tier 3 example, but it's just not quite there yet, right? So we've got taught here, used again. Developed, I like using developed. This is getting a little messy, so let me just erase all this. Led, I love the word led. And established. I mean, overall, this does use action verbs, but I don't think it uses it in the light that maximizes not only the impact of the verbs, but also conveys the actual weight of each of the responsibilities. And so now let's move on to a tier 3 example. Oh wait, mistake, this is not a tier 3 example. This is a tier 1 example. So here is going to be a tier 1.5 example. I apologize for the confusion there, but essentially tier 1 is like the tippity top and tier 3 is like the bottom of the barrel, very bad. So for our tier 1.5 example, we have taught 5 students math/science weekly, boosting scores by 12% on average, developed study plans for 5 subjects, led events with 30 plus people, updated parents. So there's a couple problems here, but it does do a couple things better, right? I see a lot more numbers, right? I can already circle all these numbers and it's great. I also have a direct impact, quantifiable impact as a result of your responsibility/action, right? You taught kids math and science and you boosted their scores with a number. You boosted it by 12% on average. That's amazing. Perfect. You developed study plans for 5 subjects, so now you're actually specifying the number of study plans you made. You led events. Ooh, wow, this is a different angle, right? So we know you're a tutor, right? A tutor. But now we also have the leadership role of leading events. I mean, how great is that, right? That's something that you could not have included up here, right? To a better extent. So you led events. Okay, cool, we led events, right? So we don't really have more information here or context versus down here, you led events with 30 plus people. Now it seems so much more magnifiable and more impactful. All right, but there are a couple key problems here. And the first one is that it's over the character limit, right? So this can be great description and all, but if it's over the character limit, it's not going to fit. And so now you're going to really have to dig in and make some changes. Number 2, there's some confusing language, right? Led events with 30 plus people. So we all know here that what we're trying to convey is that we, right, which is I, or the person that we're trying to describe, we led these events, right? We were the leader in these events that had 30 plus people attend or 30 plus people at the event. But what this phrase does, when it says led events with 30 plus people, now it sounds like you led the events concurrently alongside 30 plus people. Like 30 plus people were helping you lead the event, right? So now there's confusing language. You don't want that. You don't want missions officers to have doubts about what you're actually saying. You need to keep it concise as well as impactful at the same time. And number 3, there's a neo-filler at the end. This is very common, I would say, just having like 2 words, like 2 words right here, updated parents. It just looks like you're trying to fill the number of characters, which is a good thing, right? Because you need to maximize your characters and everything, but this is not the way to go, right? This does not hold that much weight. We update your parents as, tutor, updating the 2T's parents. That's great and all, but that really is not adding much, right? I just think, and I automatically classify this as a key responsibility of a tutor and something that you're already obligated to do, right? So now let's take a look at a quote unquote tier 1 example. In my opinion, it can be improved, but this is just, my best, attempt at improving everything that we have here. So let's take a look at it. So we have mentored 5 students weekly, boosting test scores by around 12%. Develop lessons for 5 subjects, led 30 plus person events, deliver updates and proposals to parents. So let's analyze this. So we first off have clear and measurable impact, right? Let's find that clear and measurable impact. We mentored students. Okay, that's 1. We boosted test scores. That's 2. We developed lessons for 5 subjects. 3. We led 30 plus person events. That's 4. And we ultimately delivered updates and proposals. Wow. So here's the thing, right? We could have just updated parents, right? But delivering those updates, right? So now you're delivering updates as well as proposals, right? So now you're making leaps to actually help your students reach that next level, right? You're communicating with your parents. And so because of that I would say arguably is probably another impact. And so let's write this as a 4.5 impact. Maybe not the greatest thing in the world, but still great to mention. Next is that there are very strong action verbs. I mean, before each of these sentences or phrases, there is a strong action verb, right? So we have mentored, boosting, develop, led, deliver, right? So we can see that these action verbs are used. Not only are these action verbs used because anybody can just use these verbs, but they're molded well into the sentences, right? They have great meaning. We're not just using corporate jargon here, right? We're not using the verbs for the sake of using the verbs. We're using the verbs because they're the strongest verbs that we can use to convey the meaning and impact that we have. Number 3 is maximizing characters with well-known abbreviations, right? So let's look at the abbreviations. Well, we have a bunch of commas, which is it's basic, but it works. We also have this acrylic symbol right here to demonstrate around 12%. So that saves us so many characters instead of having to say on average. That's a lot of characters right there saved. We're also, I think this one's interesting, is we're using commas here to link 2 things that are related. So you mentored 5 students weekly, comma, boosting test scores by around 12%. Those 2 are directly tied to each other, and that's why we have that comma. But for different clauses here where they're sort of not related directly, we're going to be using that colon symbol. All right, so the next thing is that we combine a quantitative accomplishment with a qualitative insight. And I like to think about it like a 75-25 rule. So what I mean by this is that a lot of it, right, a lot of your description is going to be quantitative. And so we can look in our description and see a bunch of numbers. Mentored 5 students weekly, boosted test scores by around 12%, developed lessons for 5 subjects, and you get the point, right? And so we have a bunch of accomplishments and stats based on numbers, quantitative, which should, I would say, represent around 75% of your description. However, 25%, I think, would be very valuable to have as a qualitative insight, and that's what we have down here. Now, this, in my opinion, is not the strongest, delivery of that qualitative insight, but it's something. To deliver updates and proposals to parents. This makes you seem more human, right? You're not a robot that's accomplishing all this stuff and having a bunch of stats and numbers. That just seems very generic and maybe even not authentic. And so adding something that doesn't have numbers will help you in the long run. And so the last point here is a mix of present tense ongoing and past tense completed. So this is not something that's like crazy about it, but basically it's good general rule of thumb to use the present tense when it's ongoing actions you're still doing, and use the past tense for things you have already completed or accomplished. So basically, I did this example with tutoring, right? So I would say tutoring is a much more accessible extracurricular than other things like making your own business or organization or internship or anything like that. And so if I can make something like being a tutor have all of this impact, right? Think about what we can actually do with higher tier activities, right? Something where you're in a leadership role, where you can have more say in what you're actually doing, because, our example student here is limited by the quote unquote leaders, right? The president of the organization they're volunteering for, or maybe this is a freelance thing, right? And so because of that, you can actually do a lot more in your other descriptions for those leadership roles, or maybe you have a outside activity that is quite different or unique. But now let's move on to the actual formula, right? So I want to start off by this quote by Google. Accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. So this is more applicable to like a resume for job applications, right? It's not targeted towards high schoolers by any means. But I think we can learn something from this, because this thing right here is great, right? By being detailed and showing those stats and being quantifiable, but it's way too long. It's not going to fit, right? It's not going to fit in those 150 characters that you get for your extracurricular descriptions. And so instead, I made my own formula that I think you could take inspiration from. And so the formula is step one, or the first part of your extracurricular description, is to have a overarching action. I would say prioritize this overarching action to be your most important one, right? The one that sort of defies or sums up the time that you did for this activity, right? The biggest impact, essentially. And so leading up to this overarching action, you want it to directly tie to results, right? And for this result, you need numbers, all right? This is non-negotiable. You need numbers here. And so if we look back at our tutoring example, our overarching action, which ties into being a tutor, right? Your main responsibility is tutoring kids. And so we mentored 5 students weekly. And then the direct action of that, or the result here, is you boosted test scores by around 12%. That is how you employ step 1. Now, step 2 is going to be a sub-action or impact. You want to try to use numbers for all of these. So this sub-action is we developed lessons for 5 subjects. So now we have a sub-action, which is developing lessons for 5 subjects, right? Now, a sub-impact, I think this is really instructional. A sub-impact is something more that's purely statistics, right? So maybe it's something like a byproduct of what you did as a result of all your other actions, right? So take, for example, like, like a social media, right? Like you did Instagram posts or advertising for a website, right? So a sub-impact would be something like garnered 200K page views, right? So that directly results from some of your other actions, but there's no like clear indicator, right? So it's everything combined that leads to that sub-impact. And so step 3 is the same thing. You want to have another sub-action or sub-impact. And then step 4, end with that qualitative insight that we talked about. Qualitative insight, something that doesn't have numbers. Now, if you have numbers, that's great. You can include it. But I would say for most people, having that qualitative insight is very helpful. So something key here is that the first time around, you are probably not going to be able to fit it, right? Because you're not maximizing your characters. And so because of this, you have to play around with the words and phrasings, and maybe in some cases, even eliminate one of these sub-actions, right? You can take that risk, right? If you make it sound good, if your other sentences are high quality and have that impact, then it's okay to get rid of one of these sub-actions. So why would you want to use this formula? Well, if you do get this down, right, you do get all this content down, I think it summarizes your actual impact very, very well, right? You can get a lot of the things you actually accomplished and represent that very well in a good light to admissions officers. But also you get quality, right? This is not just listing everything in a big list, right? You have those action verbs, you tie everything together, you mold it down, you make it flow, right? This is a skill that you're going to have to practice. You're not going to get it right the first time, and it's kind of hard to master, but with practice, you can get good at it. So now we're going to give you a step-by-step plan, right? Step by step, right? So if you are compiling your extracurriculars now, what would I do to write these descriptions? Well, number one, pick out however many activities you have. I just wrote 10 activities because that's how many slots you have on the Common App, but do not rank them, right? Pick out your activities, but don't rank them. Now, what you're going to do is write down every single responsibility, event, task that you had, or special memories that you had. Those special memories, very important, is going to be really relevant for that qualitative insight. So now that you have everything down on a piece of paper that you remember about the activity, right? Now you actually have a clear-cut vision about what is actually most important about each of those activities, which responsibilities that you had the most impact in, as well as all of your accomplishments, right? Because if you're just trying to think off the top of your head, you might miss something very critical. Number 3 is to revisit any old papers, files, ask your friends or parents, or check stats if you have something like social media, just to get numbers. We want numbers. The more numbers, the better, and it'll help you validate your claims. Number 4, you want to compile everything on a centralized platform like Excel or Google Doc. This is just to help you organize, right? The more organized, the better you're going to be. Number 5, list out 3 core/key values that you want to display through your descriptions for each of your activities. This ties back again to the qualitative insight. So basically, even without the qualitative insight, your quantitative things, those tasks, what do you want to show? Maybe you want to show leadership, right? So then you could be like led events with 30 plus people or whatever. Maybe you want to show innovation. You could say built a robot or something. I don't know. But basically the key here is to have those core/key values that you want to represent and then show instead of telling, right? Don't tell them that I am very innovative, I'm resourceful. Show them, right? Show them with the stats, show them with those qualitative insights. Number 6 is to actually write those descriptions, right? By using the formula above, right? So employ this formula up here and you'll be in good shape. Number 7, now that you have the descriptions written, now you can actually evaluate the actual impact and value of each activity. Read them through and then rank them. All right, so now we're closing in at the end of this video. I have some final key takeaways, so don't click off yet. Number 1, it takes a lot of practice and revising, right? This is not something you're gonna get right the first time, but it's very key and worth the time that you put in. And you can learn as you go, right? I think this is one of the skills that as you go along trying to build your descriptions, you're gonna learn a lot. Number 2, avoid corporate jargon, right? You're not trying to use the fanciest words, the longest, most complex action verbs or anything like that. Just get the point across. The more concise, the better. You want to be concise, all right? That's key. Number 3, the entire college admissions game, I would say, or extracurricular descriptions is a marketing game to show the amount of potential you have. So I would say that is one of the key qualities you definitely want to highlight throughout this, is that regardless of your circumstances, regardless of your context, you can accomplish great things. Number 4, don't try anything crazy/unconventional to an extent. So this ties back to the contradicting advice, right? I've seen posts and stuff about people, saying you should, make jokes and stuff, and that might work, but that carries a lot of risk, right? So you can be unconventional sometimes, right? With that qualitative insight, that gives you some leeway, but you also want to get your point across, get your impact across. And so, something like this, if you want to take the risk, it's up to you. It's your application. This is just my takeaway and advice. 5, show, don't tell, just like your essays. We talked about this before, right? Don't say I'm very innovative or whatever. Show them through your impact. Number 6, use as close to the 150 characters as possible, right? So maximize those characters. If you're not close to it, let's say you're using 140, 141, 142, change something, right? There's probably something you can adjust to add more value, add more words, use a better action verb, yada, 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 etc. Number 7, if you write like this, right, if you plan out and put the time in right now, it'll help you in your future job prospects, right? When you write resumes and stuff, this sort of writing and stuff is going to be very helpful for you to land a job as well. So finally, let's cap off the video with some resources. So College Essay Guy's epic list of action verbs, very, very helpful. Definitely go check this out. I'll link it in the description. The character/word counter. I would write your descriptions in this so you can actually see how many characters you have live. All right. So yeah, that does it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take all this, right? All this, everything I went through, guys, and go absolutely crazy. Good luck on your college applications. And subscribe if you learned something. Share with a friend. And thank you for watching.